Well, hello everyone. I'm Dale Delridge, Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I am not a septic expert, but I am a realtor with Benchmark, and I have a website, a new website called Call Dale to Sell, and I hope you are watching this video from there. Because on Call Dale to Sell, that's 2 L's in call and sell and 1 L in Dell, calldale2sell.com, you'll find a menu option up at the top that says links. Now this links tab is now filled up as I'm building this with interesting things I think might be relevant to someone buying a home. So that's what that's about. So if you go to the website, find links, pull it on down, you might even find a page called Septic or having to deal some way with septics. That's what this is for. I have selected 2 videos I think are pretty good videos, having screened them off of YouTube. One is from the state of Washington. We are not in the state of Washington, and they have a lot of things in the way they say things that are not applicable to Tennessee. Tennessee's different. But they do a very good job of showing you different kinds of septic systems acceptable in Washington state. Tennessee's a little different. We seem to favor the keep it simple, stupid, the KISS principle. We like a simple system, gravity fed, no moving parts, and there's some real benefit to that. However, it can make some limitation in how we utilize our precious resource of land, and that's just something we seem to have over here. By my experience, your individual mileage may vary. Now, when we get to that, we also have a second video that has what I think is a very exciting system. It's called the Aerated system. In fact, the principle is very similar to what I used to treat the sulfur gas off of my water when I ran the well. So I just didn't know it at the time. I was just working with it to aerate the water to drive that gas off. There are other systems such as lagoons and other things that are very bio-oriented, and they get complicated. And I think that might be the thing that kind of holds back Tennessee maybe from using some of these other systems, is they get complicated fairly quick. In fact, hopefully I can explain this to you without making any errors. And toward that line, I want to say I stood up last night to make for you this drawing so that we can talk about it. So here I have some lovely grass. It looks like it needs mowing, and it's not very uniform, so it's probably like my yard. My yard is not a show place. And of course then we have the grass and the dirt and sort of some more limiting areas down here. The limiting level I've drawn is kind of this little white line. Maybe it's rock or lithic rock below it, or too dense of clay or something like that. But I've just dropped a septic tank in here. I've chosen a 3-chamber tank for a specific reason, because I need that to explain one of the systems or cover one of the systems. Over here where I have the word dwelling, assume that we have a house. Okay, the pipes underneath the house that carry the waste and the solids and the waters and all that, that's called a drain line. It becomes sewage line or sewer line after it exits the foundation of the house. It's just, that's where the transition is. It's drained inside the house, it's sewer under the other side on the outside, and this is it conducts sewage. Now the sewage, I may use the term heavy fats because they're dense, but they still are lighter than water. So in this first chamber, we collect the heavies, the big heavies. Some people on those videos, they refer to it as the trash compartment, the trash tank. But this is where your materials fall, the first thing. And the first rule of septics is, this is Dell's first rule, under no circumstances have a garbage disposal, period. But I want one. Sorry, but I want one. Can't have it. But I really want a garbage disposal. I've never had a house that didn't have it. Sorry, you got a septic system. It's my advice, do not put a garbage disposal, because it will fill your tank up. And if you like having a heavy truck with long lines come over and the beep, beep, beeps and all the noise and everything goes with it and the sucking the thing down, plus the interruptions in your service that will ultimately happen, go ahead and put a garbage disposal on. But to me, it's just a simple thing. Sacrifices must be made to live out in the peace and the quiet of the country, right? So we're just going to live without a garbage disposal. What else are we not going to do? Well, we have this history in our lives of thinking, take something, drop it in the loo, and bye-bye. We don't care. We don't even want to think about what just went there, where it went. But when you own property with the septic system, whatever you put down there ain't going nowhere till it comes out in a pumper truck. It goes into your tank somewhere. Now, in Europe, a few years back, London had a huge problem. Their sewage systems are not very good. It's a very crowded, overcrowded system. It's kind of like Boston, some of these other areas that may not be as in great shape. They pack more and more people in with the infrastructure that can't handle it. And guess what happens? When somebody invented these things called the little wipes, convinced you that you weren't clean enough using your loo roll, that you needed to have this extra little baby wipe type thing, they'd flush that in the toilet because it said right on the package, flushable. But they don't break down. And some of the papers that have the extra lotions and things on it, they don't break down very well because that extra fat and grease and stuff, it adds to the scum layer as well as the sludge layer, and it delays how long it takes for that stuff to break down. You don't have to use the old English sandpaper type of bottom wipe, but you also don't need necessarily your extra luxurious, greasy, oily type of paper because it's going to fill up your septic system. And if you like pumping them out, be my guest. My advice would be rule number 2 is be reasonable in your choice of hygiene papers. Okay, so right here we are. This is where our heavy fats, our dense fats, they still float, but they're lighter. I mean, they're lighter than water, but they coagulate. In Europe, they had these things called fatbergs because those floaty wipes I was just talking about, they would come floating across, and then they would build up with the fats and oils and the greases, and they would almost make like fiberglass. And they called them fatbergs. You can look it up when you're really bored. It's not a pleasant thing. Trust me, you don't want those in your septic system. It's just my advice. Do what you want to. You buy a house, you live your life your way. But in this first chamber, which generally needs to be filled up first. Well, let me just take a break right there. Hello, I'm Dale Delbridge of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel, Call Dale to Sell. That's 1 L and Dale, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today. But in this first chamber, which generally needs to be filled up first. Well, let me just take a break right there. I show a 3-chamber here for a reason, but you can actually have a single chamber tank. And why might you want to use it? Well, this single chamber tank lets this stuff spread all the way across the entire tank. And it also lets the fats spread all the way across the tank, and so they don't fill up quite as fast and need to be pumped out. Now, where we can sometimes have problems is they don't do a terrific job of keeping the grease and stuff and sticky stuff from plugging up the other side, and that stuff can actually be in suspension and flow out in the effluent to your leach line and help plug up your leach line. So I certainly don't like a 1-chamber tank. I'm not an expert. I'm not a septic guy or soil scientist, but I would at least like to have 2 chambers. So the second chamber, I've drawn this more clear than the first chamber because this is everything. It's your poop or poo, however you want to call it, your loo roll, your paper, your sanitary paper, and of course the fats and stuff that come with your body and out of your kitchen and that sort of thing into the drain, into the sewage, and into the septic tank. So that's here. How does this work? If a gallon, or if you prefer a cubic foot of material comes into this chamber, a gallon or cubic foot, whatever you're using, has to come into this chamber. These are H pipes. They're open at the top so that we don't vapor lock, and so they don't siphon. So when we put a gallon in here, the heavies are already semi-separating at the bottom and floating to the top, and this in between is very turbid, very dirty, very dark colored water. And it will then be pushed into this pipe and onto the other side when that stuff falls in this side. So it pushes water that is cleaner than the top and the bottom, but still not very clean. With that, we'll still have some fats and some solids in it that will eventually settle down. And if we put a gallon in here, a gallon's going in the other side. And each time we separate it mechanically with a chamber, we're allowing that some settlage and some digestive action to go on to help clean it up. By the time it gets to the third chamber, it's fairly clear water, and it's not all that odory. It's not that malodorous. It doesn't stink as bad because we're pretty well much kind of cleaning a lot of it up on the way through, but it progresses. Now, another point I want to talk to you about. In Tennessee, you'll see a lot of flat tops. I wish that mine actually had risers which come up to the top so that we can inspect and we can pump very easily and very cleanly, very convenient. They're not very convenient when you're building a house and trying to settle the lawn because they can't poke. You don't want them poking up and you don't want them being below the ground because then water goes in. So for whatever reason, Tennessee seems to favor slab tops, solid tops, or the other half of a clamshell for its tops, and don't put risers in there. That makes you have to dig up your tank to clean it. Now, this has 3 chambers, and this last chamber very infrequently needs to be cleaned out because there's very little bit goes into it. The middle chamber, yeah, some. The first chamber, yes, more. And smaller. So a 3-chamber pot like this may very well need risers so that we can pump them out. In other states, like I used to live in Georgia, I believe it's a requirement in Muskogee County, Georgia. I used to live in Harris County, Muskogee County, Georgia, requires that you empty your septic tank when you sell a home. Tennessee does not. Sometimes we have those people coming from other places and they have in their mind expectations based upon buying a home in a different state, and they bring their ideas with them. Septic inspections really are not a practical part of selling homes in Tennessee because, 1, we typically have a solid top, and 2, there's just not a way to get to it. Now, it's true you have an inspection period that you're given under contract law, under 1 to 4 residential sales under the contracts that we have that regulates real estate. But you don't have the right to demand that somebody rip the top off, the topsoil off over your tank, drop it down so you can satisfy yourself that it's not full. You have an inspection right, but your inspections have to be non-destructive. In fact, that gets us into the Tennessee License Inspection Act, License Inspectors Act of 2005. An inspector, a licensed housing inspector within the limits of his or her law, cannot inspect your septic system. He does not do, he is excluded from doing underground systems, which a septic tank is. The legislature did that. It's not me, it's not my company or anybody I know. The legislature kept them from doing that, excluded that from their scope of their licensure. So you might say, well, I can call somebody, have it inspected. Okay, we've got great pumper companies out here that will take and clean out your tank for you and do a good job at that. But they're not going to come out here with a backhoe and rip the top off of somebody else's property because they don't have that permission. You can't give them that permission. So there's really not much they can do. What can be done if you want an inspection is, and it's typical to do so, the home inspector has written into their rules 2 terms: functional flow and functional drainage. So one of the things that they will do is they'll try to max out both to see if the system can take it. That's it. They don't give recommendations. They don't tell you what they think or what they suggest. It's not their place to suggest or think or give you their ideas. Their idea is to determine the condition of the home at the time of inspection. That's what the license says. That's what the law and the rules say. So what they'll do is they'll go around and they'll try to turn on all of the water sources they possibly can. That's doing 2 things. They may also even run the dishwasher and the laundry at the same time, maybe turn the showers on or the bathtubs on all at the same time, because they're trying to have the maximum flow into that home so they can see if there's any problem with restriction. Do they have enough water? Now, you would never turn on all, you would not be running laundry, flushing toilets, taking showers, the whole 9 yards, doing dishes all at the same time. So it's really a temporarily artificial maximum flow. And if the water's coming in, it's going into the drain and going into the sewage line, into your septic line. They can do that to see, do you have functional drainage? Does the water go down? And if it goes down, it passes. And honestly, if it goes down and it passes, your septic system is obviously working, is it not? I mean, I'm just using the state of Tennessee's logic, what I perceive as their logic. Now, if they were to walk around outside and notice any kind of buildup of water coming through where the leach lines are possibly not working, and why would that be? Because hopefully your lines are clear, and a lot of people think they're full of water. They have it in their mind that they're full of water all the time, and they're not. But if they're having trouble because the soil's bad, or they're full of gunk because it hasn't been filtered right and they're not flowing good, the ground around it may not absorb well and it may come to the surface. That's a sign of septic failure. Okay? If they don't see that, it passes because it's working. And it may be tomorrow, it may be 10 years. Who knows when the next time you have to have your tank pumped. But that's what happens in Tennessee. And again, I think I mentioned the flat tops of the tank. It's easier with a flat top to get the soil nice and neat when you're grading, doing final grading on a new house. It's a bit of a bummer when you got to dig it back up, when you got to dig that top up. You can't do that. Now let's talk about the next system, if I've got my graphics set up correct. Hello, I'm Dale Delbridge of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel. Call Dell to Sell. That's 1 L and Dell, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today. Now let's talk about the next system, if I've got my graphics set up correct. It will be what we call an aerated system. And it's very similar to the others, but it's why I need 3 chambers. Okay? If you have 3 chambers, the first one is the big one that collects the big stuff and does the main separation. It then puts water that is less cloudy than the initial side on the left into the right. And let's talk about bacteria. Again, I'm not a biologist, but on this side, the main breaking down of the material is done by facultative anaerobic bacteria. The environment is such that we've got a closed-in area here, not much oxygen or new air coming into it. It's not oxygen deprived, but there's just not a lot of oxygen up in this because it's trapped air. And we have a lot of material that gets flushed down each time. So the main bacteria classification of stuff eating this stuff over here, breaking this down, are non-aerobic. They don't use air. And they're facultative for the most part, meaning the difference between facultative and non-facultative is, and you'll probably never see this on a test, but non-facultative, if you put them or expose them to air, they're like if we exposed you to radiation of a nuclear meltdown, like in the movies. You can't live in the presence of high radiation, you die. That's how it works. Oxygen to a anaerobic bacteria that is non-facultative will actually kill it. I think an example of this might actually even be the Botox, the bacteria that we use to make Botox with. Botulism. It's an anaerobic, non-facultative bacteria. If you want to look that up, check me. I think that's right. I'm not an expert. I don't know these things for 100%. But it grows in a sealed container where there is no oxygen. If it's living there and it's not killed off, it grows without the presence of oxygen, and oxygen it doesn't like. A facultative bacteria, aerobic or anaerobic, doesn't care one way or the other. It won't kill them. They just don't use it. They don't need it to live. So when we get over here, if we have those natural flora and fauna over in this water, now if we pump air through this air pump in there, which contains oxygen and nitrogen and all the other wonderful things, we now feed the aerobic bacteria. So now we have the benefit of 2 different classes of bacteria that live in this side of this tank, the anaerobic facultative and the facultative aerobic bacteria. They both live in this chamber, and it helps keep this from building up quite as much. We don't see this type of system much in Tennessee because, again, I think Tennessee likes the KISS principle. The government and the governing body seem to like simple system because now we have lots of things that can go wrong with this. Our bubble stones can get full of poo and stuff if it builds up. If they're not at the right depth, they get clogged up over time anyway. The air pumps can go bad if we lose power. If we're in a, I don't know, say high theft, somebody goes, I don't know why anybody would steal your air pump, but they're fairly expensive. But the thing is, this is more stuff that can go bad. And we have more chambers, which means we're probably going to have to pump this one out more often. Now, we could again do a one chamber. Why don't we do the one chamber? Because it doesn't keep this scum layer, it doesn't protect as well from it filtering in there and going out to your field lines. A counter to that is putting a filter there. But guess what happens if the filter plugs up? You still got to dig it out to get to that thing. So there's just reason we like to keep it simple in Tennessee. And most of the time, I believe, it's just a guess, you'll find a 2-chamber tank. And it does the primary heavy separation over here, but it's large enough in the volume that it doesn't fill up too quickly. If we do this and we have access, we could, in theory, use a smaller tank because we have easy access to pump them out, clean them out quicker and easier. Now let's talk about this next step. You might hear of this thing people call a step system. And a step system does not necessarily have to be an aerated system. It can be aerated or non-aerated. Just by definition, what a step system is a septic tank effluent pump. Well, what does that really mean? Well, we're basically doing a waste separation, a solid separation in this case. Say we have a developer that buys a big piece of land, the county or city is growing, and we really need the homes for people to live in. We're a lovely part of Tennessee where we are the place to live is Tennessee, and people want to live here. But we build the best places first. We build out from the city centers and such, and our municipal system may not be able to handle the additional capacity of, say, another 150, 300 homes and the families and the numbers of people that would occupy them. Maybe it can't handle the total volume of solids going through it. It's just not size big enough. It's not capable of handling it. So one way we can do this, if we're close enough into the city that we have, or the county where we have sewage available, so we can get rid of the water, but maybe we can't handle the solids. One of the things that we can do is do a waste separation or a solid separation and pump just the water into the sewer. And then that water then may help even keep the solids of the other homes and stuff in the neighborhoods flowing through the system. So it works. If you're far enough out in the country, you don't have a sewage system, this is not even an option because there's no place for you to put your water. You have to have a conventional system or some system that handles the water, the effluent off of it. But if you're close enough to the city, there are some places where, with the proper governmental permissions and the authorities blessing it and designs and everything set up and sizing and criteria by people who are significantly smarter than me, it's possible to set up a system that separates the solids from the fluids, and then we pump the water into the sewage system. Now, this is an effluent, just means water. It's not necessarily implying clean or dirty. It just means it's a water. It's not surface water, and it's not drinking water, potable water. It's an effluent from a septic system, and we can then pump that into a smaller line that feeds into around the development into it. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, if it takes so many square feet, thousands of square feet to build for a home, and we don't have the right dirt, or it's too close to rock, or there's a limiting layer such as what I've drawn on here, this kind of white is to be my limiting layer. Could be could be too much clay, even though clay you can push through clay. It doesn't like to absorb stuff. We have lithic rock or something like that. Something's limited. Maybe you just don't have the soil depth. You can't do it. Maybe you don't have the square footage because you're trying to accommodate more and more families moving into your area, so your lot size gets smaller. Well, if your lot size gets smaller and you don't have a place to put it, at that point it's a bargain to be able to provide homes for people if we do a tank system to collect the waste, the solid waste, right? And the homeowners association then really doesn't burden by it. It's an individual home by home by home by home type thing. When you need to have your tank evacuated, you do, but it's just handling the water. And maybe the sewage system in your part of the city or county can handle the water, but it can't handle the waste. It's a way that takes some smart people and a little engineering and a lot of ingenuity to make this system work. But it is a septic tank effluent pump. Septic tank effluent pump. Here's a septic tank. There's the effluent pump, and we pump it into the city, somewhere into municipal waste system. You don't control it all. You have to have permission. You just don't go cowboy on this. You have to do according to the laws and rules and the permissions you need. Hello, I'm Dale Delbridge of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel. Call Dale to Sell. That's 1 L in Dale, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout, and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today. So let's go ahead, and I will turn the step off. And now we're back to our 3-chamber pot here. We have the heavies, the lighter, and the lighter, it gets cleaner as it goes. Well, there's something else we can do that you saw in one of the videos with the aerated system. It's not necessarily have to be aerated, but it's probably going to come in with a level of sophistication required. Let's go ahead and put that air back on just for kicks and giggles. Now we have 2 tanks. We have the septic tank and we have a holding tank. And that holding tank, we let the water, as we bump in, it gets cleaner and cleaner. It comes into this second holding tank. And just like your field line should not be full at all times, neither should this tank be. It needs to be there to be able to take that inflow of water. It's one of the things, if you have a septic system, a lot of people, it's a behavior problem, folks. You don't wait till Saturday to do 12 loads of laundry, okay? You wash a little as you go. You don't wait till Saturday to take your bath, do you? Of course not. You don't hold other things up all week to do. No, you do it a little bit at a time, and the system is designed for those number of peoples, and the criteria there can handle that flow, that demand. Well, here we have a tank that we're actually able to build water up. Well, one of the things that we can do is we can then, if we have this with a sanitizing agent, to make sure that we deodorize and kill any bacteria so it's not a biohazard to our environment, we can, in fact, then use a little sprinkler water. Maybe we use this water and we spread it on our lawns, and it keeps our grass green and pretty and an attractive part of our community. But it's complicated, and you have to maintain some sort of sanitizing agent. Now, a lot of times you might find like the pool tablets that you drop in there, you have to keep up with that. It's more human action. More people don't like having to work on their septic system, but it's part of life. If you have one of these systems, you have to maintain like a pool. Do you want a swimming pool? You're going to have to maintenance it. So you got to keep up with it daily. Well, this type of thing works the same way. You might be able to have chlorine bleach, or I've drawn this in purple for there's a chemical called potassium permanganate, which is a purple compound. It's a highly oxidizing compound, and we just want to clean this up so it's not a biohazard. But it is not necessarily certified for drinking. And we have this term here, gray water. And this is a regulated term that you need to be familiar with, like in Tennessee Environment Conservation. They'll tell you what gray water is. It's not storm water. Storm water falls from the sky, comes down to the ground, and it runs off. It's surface water. It's runoff. It's storm water. This is not storm water. This has been involved with a septic system. It's not perfectly clean, but it's not necessarily dirty. If it's effluent, I believe effluent remains sewage. And I believe that if you take a level of solids out of it and it becomes something between sewage and something between drinking water or potable water, it's not potable, it's potable water, is gray water. And there are some regulations you might run into on your use of gray water. So you might be able to use this gray water to feed a koi pond or a water feature or water your lawn, depending on how complicated you have it. But it's going to have some additional regulation beyond your initial septic design that you would have with a gravity-fed system. So I don't know if that helps or hurts, but they are more complicated. And if we're going with this simple, keep it simple, keep the complaints down, let's just have a simple gravity-fed system, there are ways we can do that. We can get a little bit more fancy and make a little more utility to it, but now we have a lot more opportunity for something in this system to go bad. And I think that's probably the thing that's holding Tennessee back from using some of the technology that other states do. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the little show here. I'm not an expert at this type of thing, but if you've never lived in the country or on the outskirts of town, perhaps you've never run anything but a municipal sewer system, and you need to know about how some of this stuff is so that you can kind of start factoring it in to your decisions, because you might find that beautiful, sweet piece of cheap property that you can afford to buy and there's not a house on it. Been my experience, if there's not a house on it in Rutherford County, there's a reason for that. And it doesn't mean it's not buildable, but it's probably going to cost you in some other way. And you need to know about it ahead of time before you get all committed and end up with a bill that you have trouble maybe maintaining and rent and all that, and you can't afford to get it developed. So land is a bit different. It's a bit different. Not every real estate person can handle it because they don't know. So anyway, I hope it helps. Come back and see me. Call DaleToSell.com.